Whoa, yeah. I like giving a little yeah in the beginning. And then I realized that you listen to this every week, so I hope you like the yeah, the karate. These are the paying sponsors for the show. If you'd like to be a paying sponsor for the show, you can email me at neveragainstudio@gmail.com. I have information I can send over to you. But these are all my friends, family, your family when you're involved here. Very fast and furious. But you can contact me and you can become a part of the show. And they keep the lights on. So I appreciate all of the sponsors that mess with the show. I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Contact me if you'd like to be a sponsor. Finishers MMA, finishersmma.com, @finishers. That's how you find them on social media. These guys have a show with us every Monday called Now We Go. You can check it out. Zach, JM, Thor, Grace, there's too many to name that come out of that school, and they are killers in the game. They are the biggest MMA jiu-jitsu school in the area, and they are owning the East Coast. You can contact them at 610-438-0746. Ask for Andrew. They are at 3761 Nicholas Street in Easton, PA. They have 2 locations as of now, Bethlehem and Allentown. They are growing into 3, 4, 5, 6. I would say they are taking over, but they already have. Check them out on all of their social media. They are awesome to follow. And if you're looking to get in shape, you're looking to choke people, you're looking to do anything at all to better your life, finishersmma.com. AllValleyRooter.net. That's not how you pronounce it all the time. I just say it that way. All Valley Rooter, Jared LaBarba. He is my plumber. He's the show's plumber. I'm getting him plumbing business all over, and I love that he is getting what he wants. He has 24-hour emergency service. He is certified, insured, and professional. You can follow him at All Valley Rooter. He's on social media, and you can find his information at allvalleyrooter.net. Jared came down over the weekend and he fixed a problem down here. He's super professional. I love him as a person. I love his business. He grew it and he's doing his own thing. It's allvalleyrooter.net. It's 24-hour professional plumbing services. He can help you out with everything you need. It's 610-762-1656. He's certified, insured, and professional. Do not be afraid to contact him for any of your plumbing needs. Support Jared. Jared supports us. Luke Delmeyer Handmade Custom Knives. I love Luke. It's lukedelmeyer.com. He's a farrier, a bladesmith, and a blacksmith. He has custom knives, and the best part about it is you can take classes to make them. So not only can you take a class to learn how to make knives, at the end of the class, you get that knife. We're working on a project together. He started recently getting into chef knives, so he's starting to make chef knives. He makes hunting knives. He can make any of your needs as far as blacksmithing. That's at Luke Delmeyer on Instagram. That is the best way to follow him. You can see all the stuff that he's posting. He shares, he does raffles, he gives giveaways. Check out all things Luke Delmeyer at lukedelmeyer.com. We've had him on the show before. You can dig down in the library, listen to how he got started and where he's at now. I'm excited to work with Luke. He's a really good friend of the show, and I'm excited to showcase his chef knife that he's making me. Check out all things Luke Delmeyer at lukedelmeyer.com. Farrier, bladesmith, blacksmith. Rips Auto Detail. This guy is the best, hands down, in the area. I've interviewed him. I know his story. He's doing things that others aren't, and I love that he fucks with the show. I love getting the best of the best and having them support and be a part of this. That's what the sponsorship is for. I'm giving you the best people in their profession, and Rips is the best at auto detail. It's at Rips Auto Detail for Instagram. You follow that. He's showing you the different cars he does, and it's at 630 North Nelson Street in Allentown, PA. He offers paint correction, ceramic, SPS coatings, and more. This is appointment only, and it's ripsautodetail@gmail.com. You can call him at 484-553-1366. I tell you, follow him. If you don't know, you want to know more about what he does, follow him on Instagram. Follow Rips Auto Detail, and you can see all the things that Rip does. He's a big part of the show. We have a separate show we do called Road Dogs, and you can check out his past interviews and hear his whole story. I couldn't recommend this guy more for your auto, car, boat, plane. This guy literally has done everything, and he is the best in the area doing this. Rips Auto Detail. Never Again Radio. I don't even know So this is... Oh my God, I'm stuck on that cord. Every time I try and start this or end it, it's completely unprofessional. Welcome to Never Again Radio. How are you? Thank you for driving all the way up here. You are from New York City?
New York City,
Manhattan. Bronx? Manhattan. I found out about you. I think you shared Angelo's porchetta.
That's right.
And then I was like, how amazing is that man? And then we started talking. And then you were like, I got this book. And then I was like, another food person. I love food. This, and we'll get into the book in a second, is this whole book is about soup, but you have a bit of a story. Like your background comes from cooking. How did you get involved in cooking, and go over a little bit about how everything started before the book and you jumping into your own thing?
And I actually have a background in public accounting before cooking, which is kind of interesting. But well, first of all, thank you for having me on.
Of course.
Super excited. First time in the Lehigh Valley for me. Although I did grow up in New Jersey, South Jersey, so I should have been here before. But in any case, I am an Italian American, so I grew up in a family where we were cooking all the time. And I was that 5-year-old who was cooking side by side with her mom and her grandmother. And I always loved to cook, I think because I always loved to eat, frankly. So I always was in the kitchen, but I never really considered food as a career because I was also really into academics. So I never really considered going into food as a career until I was in a career that I just wasn't very passionate about. And I started off in the accounting world. I worked at a public accounting firm doing audit in New York City. I also had a great opportunity to go to Europe and work for 2 years in Geneva, Switzerland with that company. And I'm mentioning that because that was such a life-defining experience for me when I was exposed to so much more food-wise, in addition to like my strong Italian-American food roots and cooking roots, but learning more about all these other foods and cuisines in the world. And I think I was 25, I moved to Switzerland for 2 years, and being there on my own kind of gave me the courage to come back to the U.S., quit my job. I moved back in with my parents in South Jersey, and I went to cooking school in Philadelphia. Now,
that's crazy.
Yeah, no, it was a huge 180. It was a really big deal. Obviously, I'd been working for 5 years in that field, and still full of student loans and whatnot, but took the leap. And I was lucky. I had the support of my parents, which I wasn't sure if I would.
Wow, those are scary moments to talk to them.
And, so I went to cooking school, and I thought I want to combine my business background with food. I knew restaurants and working the line weren't my calling. I figured I'd have to do it for a little while. But what I really thought is maybe one day I would own my own gourmet food shop, an Italian specialty store. I loved the idea of prepared foods, and this is before it was everywhere. When I lived in Manhattan, when I was working at Ernst & Young, people would come to visit me. And we wouldn't go to the museums. I would be like, you got to check out this great specialty food shop, kind of like Angelo's shop, right? Yeah. So like I was obsessed with them, and I'm like, oh, this is just so great. I would love to have a shop like that one day. So I didn't do that, but I did end up in the grocery industry. I worked for Whole Foods Market for close to, well, let's just say a really long time.
Yeah.
And, I started out in operations, but I grew into a corporate position, which was basically akin to a culinary director or executive chef, where I was primarily working on food development, whether it's creating menus, creating recipes region-wide, creating culinary concepts. It was at a time when Whole Foods was opening up a lot of stores with the mini concepts, the mini restaurants in the stores, the mini eateries. We called them venues. Might have been like a Middle Eastern venue in one store, or like a diner in another store. So I was over a series of many years, I was just developing constantly, whether it was like a new concept, a new menu, a new group of recipes, a lot of region-wide projects. And I really loved developing recipes. I think I'm very right brain, left brain, and that whole, the left brain, that's the CPA side of me, and the math and the numbers just worked really well with the creative side that had to develop recipes, because there's actually a lot of analytical and numbers involved in creating recipes on the commercial, on a commercial side. And I did that for a really long time, and I loved it for a really long time. At some point, I thought I wanted to do something different, so I left and went to work for a very small startup / turnaround in New York City. It was actually a vegan, organic food and juice company, which was very short-lived. It was actually a really fun experience, but it was a company that just didn't last that long. So I got laid off from that job. This was the summer of 2015. In September of 2015, I started an LLC called It's All About the Food. And I started in culinary consulting. Because at that point I figured, I now actually remember having a conversation with my former CEO. I'm like, if I had the guts, I just would quit my job and just start consulting. And he's like, well, why don't you, this is before I got laid off, but I saw the writing on the wall. I knew it was coming because they were shopping around to sell the business. And he's like, well, why don't you do that? And I'm like, well, I don't know. It's just something you talk about. It's not something you actually do. And he's like, Michele, he's like, no one is going to be a better food consultant than you.
Isn't it weird when you have those conversations that are kind of the catalyst for it to start moving forward, where it's just a simple comment from somebody who isn't directly connected to you? Like if my parents told me to do that, I'd be like, it's not that easy.
Right.
But where you just have some simple conversation where someone's like, why don't you just do it? And then it makes sense and you're like, I can just do it.
It definitely has to be, I think, the right person saying it to you at the right time.
Yes.
And he was the right person. He was my former CEO. He had been like a mentor to me. And I worked for him. So he knew and he was very, very experienced in the industry. So he knew what my abilities were. And he's like, no one's going to make a better food consultant than you. And I'm like, oh. So once I got laid off, I took a couple of months off, which was actually the best summer ever.
Yeah.
Because it was a July, August. It was like all of a sudden I became a beach person again after many years. And I started my LLC and it was, it was the fall of 2015. And basically, and I'm still doing that. It's evolved over time. I mean, I've experienced on anything from the creative development side of working with small concepts, fast casuals, kind of an eclectic lineup of food businesses. It's lately what I get hired for. It's almost always the creative side of the menu. So recipe development, menu development in some form of cost, of course, and then the operations that go along with that, whether it's like food costing or SOPs or that kind of stuff. But as an independent consultant, and I'm sure you understand this, there are peaks and valleys in terms of how busy you are.
It's like being bipolar.
And the thing is, when I first started, I was so busy. It was really for like the first year and a half, 2 years. I just got like client after client. I'm like, wow, this is great. Like,
this is how it's always going to be.
This is how it's always going to be. But like we were talking earlier, like
it dips down, and then that's when you got to get into the
dips down, and then it just was like there was enough there to kind of keep me going. But then there was a kind of a stretch where I wasn't working that much, and I was sitting there having a conversation with a friend of mine who was also laid off and she's in the marketing world. She's a lot younger than me, and at the time I was getting like very intrigued by what was going on in social media. I mean, I had my It's All About the Food account, which I had had for a long time.
Were you running that on Instagram and doing a full social media? Nothing like you're doing now, but had you put work into it?
At the time, I hadn't really put strategic work into it. I was always posting because I just thought it was fun.
Yep.
Before I started the consulting, because I always had used this term, it's all about the food. It was just one of these terms when I was at Whole Foods, we always just, it's all about the food. So when I started a company, I'm like, I'm going to call it It's All About the Food. So then that account became more about my consulting work. And yeah, I mean, it's actually, there's a lot on there, but I haven't been posting much there in the last couple of years. Because once I started Mangia with Michele, back up, I did have a second Instagram account, which was called In Abruzzi si mangia bene. So it was this Italian expression, which I created after a trip to Italy in 2015 from the region my grandparents are from. That expression, In Abruzzi si mangia bene, means in Abruzzi, you eat well. And I thought it was just a cool, fun phrase. So I started a second account just for my love and passion for all things Italian food, travel. It was not strategic at all. I wasn't putting recipes on there. It might have just been like a picture of a great dish of pasta I had at a restaurant or quotes, this, that, and the other thing. So getting back to this conversation I had with my friend, I'm like, what's up with all these influencers like on social media? There's apparently now this is like something you can do to actually have like people are doing this for their career. I'm like, I think I'm an influencer.
It's an odd thing to witness where I was in the same boat where you start pushing, you're just pushing yourself and you're pushing your business and you're kind of doing it for fun, but you're taking it seriously, but it's not a job at that time. And then when you see someone where I'm like, wait a minute, I'm like, this guy's just doing this and making money. And that I always remember being in kitchens and stuff like that would intrigue me to when I would say to like people I'd be working with, I was like, well, wait a minute, man, like, how does this guy just get to post food all day and makes a living off of it? And how did he do that? And that always is what the rabbit hole where I wanted to go down, where I was like, how do these influencers, because people can just be like, oh, they're influencers. But like, yeah, but how do you do that? Because it's a dream job to be able to do what you love and be able to put it out there.
And I think that word over the past few years has taken on a new meaning in not such a positive way.
Absolutely. But I think a lot of that is from people who are either jealous or they can't figure out on their own. Like seeing someone happy and making money on Instagram, and that's what they do for a living, and you're at a terrible job, really is going to make you dislike people like that, you know?
Right. That's definitely, I think that's happened for sure. But I was just kind of coming to know about this world of influencers. And then I'm thinking to myself, I actually have credibility. You know, I'm culinary trained. I've been working in the industry for a really long time. Maybe I should like be a little bit more strategic. So I changed In Abruzzi si mangia bene to Mangia with Michele. It's the same account. I just changed the name 3 years ago, a little over 3 years ago. And I thought I would become a little more strategic, meaning like really put out like recipes, put out the recipes for the home cooks, put out like great food that I'm developing and share it with everybody. And I initially thought like it would just be a great complement to my consulting business. That was my only thought in the beginning. But it soon took on a complete life of its own, and it didn't even take that long, which I was just not expecting. And what I mean is there were so many connections that I started making with people that were so incredible, and they still are. And people like Angelo, like I met Angelo on Instagram. In fact, the funny thing about Angelo, and we're talking about Mind Machine here, for those of you out there that don't follow him, at Mind Machine.
The nickname is stuck with him.
I have a follower who's in Puglia, which is in the heel of Italy. His name is Tonino Franco, and he started following me. And then one day he writes me, he's like, do you know Angelo? And I'm like, Angelo who? He's like, Angelo, he has a store. He's in New Jersey. I guess maybe he thought that we all knew each other.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, no. And he shared his account. He's like, I think that you two have like the same culinary spirit, you know? And I'm like, okay. So I started following Angelo. Anyway, that's long story short. Angelo and I are now friends, you know, and I met you through Angelo essentially.
Yeah.
And
I'm meeting a ton of people through Angelo.
Which is so funny. So what I mean is, so my circle in terms of people that were great food people got bigger. My circle of Italian Americans and people that are really into the Italian American community and doing a lot in that community also grew. And I ended up connecting with someone, which was a really interesting relationship. Italian Enclaves. It's this guy, Ray, who is working to document all of the Italian enclaves within the U.S. He ended up turning into a nonprofit, and I've been working with him on that. But that was like a great group of people that I've been exposed to. But most importantly are all the people, all the home cooks out there that are actually making my recipes in their kitchens. And then the messages that I would receive from them about how like this recipe reminded them of something their grandmother used to make or their mom made, or, oh my God, I haven't thought about that in years. And then they start sending me pictures of the food that they're making. And I'm just a very like sensitive, like emotional person. I love connections with people. So like, it touched me so quickly and so much.
Well, that was what you said to me, because I made the lasagna soup with my friend who I cook with a lot. And we loved it. The kids get involved and they were doing stuff. And then when I was done, I sent it to you and you were like, oh my God, you're like, I absolutely adore and love when people send me pictures of their food. And then I was like, man, like she probably gets so many people on a daily basis that are just like tagging you and stuff from the book or just sending you stuff. And I'm like, that's like, how does that feel? I mean, does it motivate you when you're down? Like, does it push you to go with this further because you're just going to get more connections? Like, what does that do on a personal level?
It all of that. Yes. And I even before the book, I was getting tons of messages and, comments and connections like that. And it definitely keeps me going. Because, putting content out there is not necessarily the easiest thing in the world.
It's work.
It's work. By no means do I consider myself a food photographer, even though I did all the
But that was one of the first things I complimented you on.
Well, I know, because I do everything with my iPhone.
Yeah.
And I do, one of these days, it's one of the bubbles in the air to become a better food photographer. And I definitely want to, and I think you need to be in this business. But regardless, a lot of people on social media don't care that much. They want the recipe. They want to know about the food. They want to, know about the connections, what inspired you, and that kind of thing. So Manja with Michele then, so I started making these connections, and as it started like just touching me so much, and it started just kind of growing organically, and I started putting more and more content out there. And don't get me wrong, I'm still consulting. That's my bread and butter, and that's how I support myself. But somewhere along the line, my professional passions have completely shifted, and I'm just sort of at the point where, okay, X amount of years in food service is probably it's almost enough. And I would love to take the rest of my years of working and really focus on Manja with Michele and continue to grow that brand and put a blog website together and maybe do cookbooks and maybe do videos and maybe do podcasts and all these things that we've been talking about. And it is a process. I have always wanted to do a cookbook, for many, many years. I went to cooking school in my 20s a long time ago. So it's something that's always been out there. Like,
how long were you in cooking school for?
It was a 15-month program, 12 months in class, and the last 3 months were like you're working, essentially.
Yeah. I've always wanted to go back and take something. I don't know if they have night courses. They probably do, but it's one thing with cooking. I always was just thrown into restaurants, and there's a lot of things that I learned. Like when I saw your book, I was so excited because I don't get into making soups and I don't get into making bases. And I was like, there's so much knowledge here that I would have gotten out of going to like a school. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like just the basics of like how to do some specific
Sure.
things. But that's one thing when people say that they actually got to go to school for culinary. It's awesome that you got to do that.
I am glad I did that. I mean, I wanted to be in the food industry. I had never worked in the food industry. So I think a lot of people in school looked down on me a little bit at that time. I was in my mid-20s too. I wasn't like an 18-year-old. I was 27 when I went to cooking school. Never having worked in a professional kitchen, working a lot, like cooking a lot in my life and at home, but I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. It is a rough, I'd say, career. But I am really glad I went I am really glad I went because I like, just the way my mind works and the way that I learn things. I like knowing the basics. I like knowing the foundation, and I like knowing why you're doing things.
Because once you have the foundation and you have the knowledge of why, then you build off of that and make it your own.
Yeah, and for sure, all those techniques and all the classic techniques, and also what I just have learned in years in the industry, I think is reflected in my brand, Manja with Michele, because I bring that element of, well, this is how they do it in the industry, or I'm just going to I'm going to present this recipe in a really easy way because I used to write that for most of my career. I'm writing recipes in a really, really easy way for people to execute on a daily basis. So that's how I write my recipes as a food blogger.
Is it harder to dumb down the recipe than to like write out a full version?
No.
Because you basically have to come to it from an angle now of this has to be the basic way for anyone to do it.
No, I guess because I've been doing it for so long.
That's right.
That way. And, even just last night, I got feedback about how easy the recipes are to follow in the book.
It's very easy to follow.
And that means more to me than, any compliment on the photos or anything else, because that's what people are going to be using the book for.
Nothing was overcomplicated. I mean, we did the lasagna recipe and we referenced back to it, and it was easy to follow the way the wording is, the size of the wording. It's easy to read and cook at the same time. And we kept having to go back to reference, and we weren't getting lost. And it wasn't like, well, what is this? Because I remember when I first started cooking off of recipes was just doing stuff off the Food Network.
Right.
And that was kind of a little bit more complicated. This is super... a kid could make half the stuff in here by just following the recipes.
I have gotten the feedback that, wow, that's a lot of ingredients, so that's a lot of chopping. I'm not going to say that's not true. It's making soup from scratch. You're cooking. Right. It's making soup from scratch.
Yeah.
Making soup from scratch or making anything from scratch, there usually is a lot of cooking. It doesn't mean, though, that it's a complex recipe. It just means that you might have to prep. You might have to spend some time prepping. But once everything's prepped, usually the soups go very quickly. Like even the lasagna soup's a great example. That soup doesn't take that long to make.
No.
Once you have all the ingredients in front of you, it actually goes pretty quickly.
No, because we started it and then we had to have it ready for when her husband came home. And it timed enough. It wasn't anything like we were making bread or anything like that. Because while some things were going, then we went over to make the cheese, like the thing. Then I love
cheese topping.
But I love the cheese topping, and that's the thing I take from cookbooks is like where there'll be stuff like that, and I'm like, I can use this cheese topping in this thing, and you could use it in this. Like there's more to just that recipe in there. There's a knowledge of different techniques that you're using to add to the soup where I could take that cheese thing and add it to, like I started thinking about stuffing things with that cheese thing. And I'm like, dude, there's so much in here to just learn.
I think so. And I do. So I just started doing Instagram lives. I did 2 so far. My second one was last night.
Good for you, because for anyone who thinks that that's easy to hop on live, I do this and it's uncomfortable for me to go on live. And the guy who helps me out with like the Facebook stuff and all that, he's like, you need to go on live once a week. And I stopped doing it because I'm uncomfortable doing it, because it's just, it's weird to be on live, and then people are saying things to you. So like, credit to you, keep doing it, because it'll eventually feel normal. But that's the thing that I need to work on with being live more, and I want to do it with the show. But it's not easy to pop on live and just start interacting.
And
with
also,
people.
It's not my personality. Like so the first 3 years of Mange,
I do this, and it's not my personality.
For the first 3 years of Mange with Michele, I never did a live. I mean, I'm not the person who's holding up the phone like this and just talking to the audience all the time.
And we didn't grow up doing that. Like the kids now, it's I'll go over to my friend's house and his daughter's on a FaceTime call. Like kids growing up, by the time they're 18, are going to be they're going to feel comfortable doing that. It's still uncomfortable for me because we played in the woods. We didn't have phones like that.
I mean, this is more comfortable because you and I are talking to each other.
Yes. And I can tell. Immediately we talked for 3 minutes and I was like, okay, this podcast is going to be awesome. There's some people that I bring on and it's work. This isn't work. We could do this for 5 hours.
The Instagram live is weird because, and by the way, I have like one vantage point. Like there's one vantage point in my Manhattan apartment that works. So every live I do is going to be that. So it's up here, and it has to be up here so that you could see part of the pot, and then you can see me. And it's just me talking to me. All I see is me. Yeah. And I do see that there are other people coming on and people are making comments. It's kind of hard sometimes to like look at the comments. Yeah, you're cooking. And also remember what you're supposed to say. Yeah. And then I realized last night that I was just waiting for the soup to simmer, and I'm like, okay. I'm like, well, let's talk about a roux, which is the classic cooking technique of like thickening a soup that I used in the chicken Marsala soup. And let's talk about the 5 mother sauces. So these are things like, I don't know if the home cook's interested in them at all, but they're like a little bit of my professional background that I'm bringing in. I like that though, because that's the stuff that I want out of the book. I want to know about the roux. I didn't go to classes. It's like I didn't learn a lot of that stuff in the restaurants I worked in. I was always flat top, the speed guy. I wasn't back, doing a lot of the heavy prep. So it's like that's the stuff that I love getting out of it. Well, it's funny because I self-published this book, so there was no... That was fun, I bet. We could get into that then. Yeah, but so I've been writing recipes for a career. But when I went to edit my recipes for this, and I actually had this book, what was it called? The Recipe Writer's Manual? Something like that, which is essentially a guideline of how to write recipes for a cookbook. And it's more about the style of the recipes. What I realized is that you don't necessarily want to use words like roux or render or deglaze because a lot of people don't know what they are. Yeah. Now, I did have every one of the recipes in the book tested by friends and family that are home cooks that I knew would follow my recipe verbatim and give me like honest feedback. And it was great. It was such a great process. And I definitely made edits to the recipes. And multiple people who are extremely intelligent and they cook a lot at home, they're like, we don't know what deglaze means. What is deglaze? And I'm like, well, that's really good. Okay, so I took that word deglaze out and I just described. I'm like, okay, scrape the bottom of the pan, and and the same thing with render. I think it was my cousin. I think it's important you point that out because before I knew a lot about it, and you would be following a recipe. There's definitely steps where I'd be, and I even with like doing bread and stuff, where it's like, what? And then and now that you bring that up, I do remember there's times where I'm like, I don't know what that is, and then you just wing it, and then it can completely change the way anything's supposed to be. And then if someone doesn't know what deglazing is, they don't deglaze it, and then they're like, well, I didn't like her stuff. Right. You didn't know what to do. Right. No, and I'm coming at it from a professional background, so I sometimes forget that not everybody knows everything that I know. Yeah. Or when you write a recipe for the professional kitchen, you do assume certain base knowledge of things. And I guess depending on what kind of cookbook you're writing or who your audience is, you don't really want to do that. Like I was writing this book for America. And you don't really know. And the other thing too is I have a ton of cookbooks, and like you could go with an Action Bronson cookbook where he's talking to you like he's like smash the cutlet out till it looks like Italy. Now that was the first time. That was the first time where I was ever like, man, this is like written for
like as if he was hanging out with you in the kitchen. And then I picked up Maddie Matherson's book, and I was so excited for that because there is an overabundance. It's pages for each recipe, so you don't know what you're getting out of a cookbook. And I feel like with this one, you kind of hit both fields where you get a ton of knowledge, but it also explains everything super simple.
And there's a format to them because this is a niche cookbook and this is a single topic cookbook. So there are 31 soup recipes. It's not like there's appetizers and there's pastas and there's main courses and whatnot. So there is, once you make one or two soups in here, you probably can make them all.
Yeah.
And I was talking about that last night on my live. So on the chicken Marsala soup, you're making kind of like a modified roux. And it's also a chicken-based soup. And what I said is all the chicken-based soups, and there's a number of them in here, are more or less the same technique. So if you've made one, you probably can make any of them without any problem. The same thing with the roux thickened soups. Once you've done it once, you're going to be like a whiz at it for all the others. So making soup is a technique. So again, once you make it once or twice, you're going to be able to do all of them.
Yeah.
Without much of an issue.
I like that though. I like that you pointed that out because I didn't even think of that. Because if you would actually go through and do half these recipes, by the time you're on 5, 6, 7, you would be able to just kind of just really start whipping soups together.
I think so. And then whipping your own soups together.
Yes, that's what I wanted to get into too. That's why I'm excited for this, because if I make 20 of your soups, then I know how to make soup. And then that's when even when you were like the lasagna soup, where you were like, hey, just throw the pasta in with it when it simmers. And at first I was like, well, don't we have to make the pasta first? And my friend's like, no, you put it in with it. And then I was like, man, like there's so many different techniques in here that I'd be able to take all of that and then start making my own soups. Because we make a lot of, I like to take my knowledge of cooking and then push the barriers of it. But I can't do that with soups because I don't know how to make soups. But now that I have this, I'm going to have the knowledge of making soups, and I'm going to start showing you stuff, being like, yeah, look at this beer cheese soup I made, and look at this, and you can do this. And then,
Oh, that's awesome. But I'm glad, that's actually a really good point. So probably there are lots of lasagna soup recipes out there on the internet or other soup recipes out there with pasta in it. And I would say probably 85% of them or more are going to tell you, cook the pasta separately. And a lot of them are going to tell you, keep the pasta separate until right before you're actually going to serve it and just heat it up together so that the pasta doesn't get overcooked and the overall soup doesn't get too thick. And I do mention that earlier in the book, in the about the recipe, in the getting started section, notes about the recipes, I talk about pasta and rice and when they're added. My goal with this, again, going back to how I like to write recipes, was to keep it as streamlined as possible. And one of the things that contributes to that is that it's a one-pot soup, that you're using as few pots and as possible. So unless you're making a topping like the croutons for the garlic bread, in which case you are going to use or
it was a separate cheese thing to add in was with the lasagna.
Yeah, so the topping is something that you're probably going to need to, make in a different pan or pot. But as far as the soup, I designed them so that the soups with the pasta, with the rice, that those items are cooking in the soup themselves. And that's why that you might at first seem like, oh, there's a lot of liquid. But I increased the amount of liquid that's in the soup, knowing that we were going to cook the pasta. It doesn't mean that those soups aren't going to continue to thicken up, but they're still going to be really delicious. So yeah, you might have lasagna soup on day 2, but it will still be a really great soup. And, for those people that don't like that, you can absolutely just add the pasta in right before.
Originally, when we got into the lasagna soup, I was like we had it going. And it was simple. And I did like that because we used a Dutch oven. My friend has one. And I never used one of those before. And then when I was like, what is this? Because you can do anything in them. Yeah. We started building the layers. And I liked that because if you, my dad always used to yell at me, and I do it now. It's like, clean up as you go. Like if you keep it in one thing, you can have the soups going, and then everything. We were having the kids help, and then I was like, all right, we got to do the cheese topping, and then we got to make the pasta. And she was just like, no. And I was like, what do you mean? And then she goes, well, we put the pasta in, and then we let it simmer. And then when and this is what I love getting out of cookbooks, and why I push people to get cookbooks and get into this, is because then I was like, oh, that makes sense to not make pasta, because it's the same thing as boiling the pasta, except for the soup's boiling it. And I'm like, that's going to have more flavor. Then it's less another pot on the burner. And I was like, this is so simple. And then when we put everything in, then we were done. And then we just had to wait for the pasta to boil inside the soup. But I mean, then it's basically, then it's done. Yeah.
You do have to be a little bit more on it when paying attention when you're doing that. And I do make the note in all the recipes with pasta or rice is once you add it, don't really walk away. Like stay there and stir it because it is going to get glumpy and, taste it along the way for doneness. But I mean, I thought it was just the easiest way.
It is. And when we were eating it, I was like, this is no different than if we would have just made pasta and put it in here. Because then you're also running the risk of cooking the pasta once, then cooking the pasta a second time. And then I don't know. I really enjoyed from the perspective of somebody making soup, it seemed this was a layered formula that was the easiest way to do it. And the most, I don't even know how to say it, but like the most that it would be not a mess. You don't have 3 things going and like, there's some stuff where you get into like we were doing short ribs the other day and some other stuff. And it's like, you got a bunch of different things going and it's just, sometimes cooking's stressful. This was not stressful. It's almost therapeutic.
Listen, there's always, what do they say? There's more than one way to skin a cat.
Absolutely.
Like there's always another way to do something, whether it's better or just different. You can always make something better. You can always make something more complicated or less complicated. So this was the way that I wanted to present, my 31 recipes to the world.
I enjoyed it. Like I said, coming from, we made one so far. And then after we made it the next day, she was like, oh, it's so much better. Cause it's like soups and stuff like that. Like I have a friend who brings a chili to a party. And I was like, you going to make the chili? And he goes, no, I make that 2 days before. So it sits and then it's the best way. So it was awesome for leftovers. It thickened up a little bit, which the way, you can add liquid, but the friend of mine, he liked it better that way.
And I'm glad that you mentioned that you said your friends, the family got involved in making it and the kids got involved. And these recipes are really designed for that. Like they make a big pot of soup. So they're assuming that you're eating them with your family or friends or that you're giving them away. Like they're meant to be shared. And frankly, it's just the way that I cook. I always just make a big batch of something because I always want to share it with people. Way. I know. And I love that I'm getting so much feedback from people out there that their kids are getting involved in helping them make the soup. So that's awesome to me.
No, we had Tucker was like cutting the onions and Violet was doing something. And then I started cooking with my friend's wife, Gina, and then the kids would watch us and then they'd be like, we want to help. Yeah. So then we just started putting them to work. We're like, all right, you're prepping, cut the onions up. But they loved it. And then it was like, her husband came home and then there was enough soup for everybody. And I think we had some bread with it. And, there was plenty of leftovers where I took a half a container and they still had plenty left over for them. I liked it. I'm excited to get more into the soups and everything. Since this came out, like what's changed with your social media now where you have something to offer people and like people are talking to you about the soup? Like, what's going on with the book since it's been released?
So the book got released right after Thanksgiving, the ebook and the paperback, I think the day after Thanksgiving, and then Cyber Monday was when the hardcover got released. And I just feel like everything's about the book right now. You know, I mean, it's hard for me to put out any new content.
It should be about the book.
Quite honestly, I just don't have the bandwidth, and it's really important. I don't want to miss the opportunity. I mean, it's a soup book. We're in soup season.
Yeah,
it's a comfort food soup book. I'm like, I tell people this is not the chicken pastinas of the world. These are hearty soups, and the world that we're in right now, where everybody is craving comfort food to kind of help with the realities of what's going on. I think makes it even more apropos, and it's winter, so everything kind of does need to be about the book. I don't want to miss my opportunity. So what I'm doing, I started Instagram lives of, like I said, just did my second of making recipes from the book. Obviously, I would love to encourage people to check out the book and to consider buying the book. That's obviously a goal. And what else? There's been a lot of great connections with people like you. I have done a couple of podcasts. I have another podcast next week. I was on a great Facebook Live on Tuesday with a famous author, Adriana Trigiani. So things are going. It's a pretty busy couple of weeks, and things are actually really, really great. There's been a lot of great feedback on social media of people who bought the book, who just received the book. They got the book for a gift. And then, of course, I'm getting a lot of photos of people making the soups, whether it's like a picture of their son making stock or their versions of the SOUPified dishes. So I share that as well on all my stories. So I'm trying to share, like, everything that's coming into me, I'm trying to share it as well.
It's got to feel good, and especially with like we got into a little bit of how you got into self-publishing this, and we don't have to get into the whole story, but that is a ton of work and was a ton of like sacrifice and things that you did. And like, I think it should be about the book right now. Like, I like that you're getting the opportunity to go on multiple podcasts. Like, you know, this is like, it's a new time. It's not like back in the day where you had to be famous and then you got shipped around on all these different TV shows. And then, you know, then you were in and out. And then it was like, that was really the only way to do it. I like that you built this big Instagram following, and then now you have such a reach where you're meeting new people and getting new opportunities, and like you drove up here today and like you're getting to promote your book, which was a ton of hard work and should be promoted because of the sacrifices you made for that. And I think a lot of times people forget that because everything looks so simple on social media, but there's a ton of work that went into this, so it should be about promoting the book right now.
Thank you. Yeah, it's pretty incredible. I still can't believe I did it, you know.
Yeah, when you were explaining, like, I've taken like done some crazy things with this business, and I like, that's my favorite thing about meeting a guest, and I'm like, I can't wait to have him on because there's so much in common where you love something and you're so passionate about something, you literally put everything into it. And there's things with this business and what I'm doing that I know where my friends would have stopped, and I know where people would have given up. I know where, you know, just in general, that like I'm so obsessed and so in love with what I'm doing and creating and doing this that you don't stop for anything. And like when you started explaining to me like how like for instance, the lobby upstairs, like everyone's like, wow, that looks so cool. And I'm like, I can tell you exactly what not to do with doing that project because you don't know until you get into it. But there's so many people that are afraid of failing. The fact that you went through, first of all, writing this many recipes out, even though you had the background of it, it still would be difficult to sit down and write all of this out and then have it all edited, and like, you know, like that's a long time of doing all that.
It is. Photographing them and styling them and planning it out and grocery shopping and having them tested. Them.
I didn't even think of all the shopping because you have to make everything.
Well, right. And you buy more stuff than you think you're going to need because you always prepare for like, well, if I have to do it twice, if I mess up. But I spent so much time planning out. I
know you did.
Planning out each recipe before I actually went into the kitchen.
Yeah.
That's just my strategy in general for how I work. But I really wanted the recipes to be successful the first time I made them.
Yeah. How many? What was probably the most difficult one that was? Is there any one that was like you thought about getting it out of there because it was just becoming?
Well, there were ones that I got out of there.
Yeah. Just ones that didn't hit a home run every time.
Well, not that I made them and they didn't. I didn't like them. It was as I started to make SOUPified, because SOUPified, we should talk about the concept of SOUPified. We haven't really.
Yeah.
So SOUPified is a new word. It's not a real word. It's, you know, the act of making something into soup that's not a soup dish, right? So these are soup versions of your favorite dishes. They're soup versions of dishes that do not exist in soup form. And the idea is that you maintain the spirit and the soul of the original dish and the taste and the flavor and the texture as much as possible.
Where did you come up with that concept?
I wish I had a really good answer for that question because I always get asked it. But the truth is I have so many like creative bubbles of ideas for recipes that are just all out there.
Yeah.
And I, over the months and couple years of Manja with Michele, I did a couple of SOUPified recipes. I wasn't calling them that. I was calling them unlikely soups. And if anyone's been following me for a long time, you might remember that. And I actually went back and I checked this the other day. 3 years ago, I did my first SOUPified recipe. It was a Sardinian pasta dish, which is called Malarettis alla Campidinese. It's a pasta dish in a saffron sausage tomato sauce. And I made a soup version of it. I just wanted to try something different. And then a year later, I did a soup version of broccoli rabe sausage and provolone sub.
Ooh.
Right? And then earlier this year, I think it was before COVID, I made essentially the baba ganoush soup, but I was calling it eggplant tahini soup. But it tasted just like baba ganoush. And then COVID hit, and then I was like, I think I'm just going to work on an ebook. I was chatting with a friend, and we both said we were going to work on ebooks. And in my mind, an ebook was a PDF of a small collection of recipes that I would somehow eventually have on my website when I eventually got to launch my website, because I thought it would be good to have a product and something I could sell. I thought maybe like 5 recipes, maybe 10. And I thought for that, why don't I just keep doing more soups like the baba ganoush soup. And so that's kind of where it came from. The word SOUPified, I for months I was just sort of referring to the concept as unlikely soups, but I knew that wasn't going to be the name. And I was chatting with my sister. She's like, why don't you call it SOUPified? I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, I love that. That's brilliant. So I just kept going with it. And first it was just a brain dump. I mean, I have on my notes app on my phone, I just have a list of recipes.
I have so much stuff like
anytime that. Like I had an idea, I put it on there. And so I kind of was like, in my mind, like kind of figuring out like, well, how would that work? Like I knew something like a lasagna soup would work. I knew something like a bacon cheeseburger soup would work. Chicken banh mi was on there. Sandwich was on there, but that's one that just didn't make the cut. If there's ever a volume 2, I think I could figure it out. But I was thinking, I don't know if there's enough, or maybe it'll be, I just wasn't 100% sure about that. I also thought a cacio e pepe soup would be great, but there's not enough. All cacio e pepe is pasta and pecorino and black pepper. Like, I don't know if there's enough there to actually make a soup version of it. So I think it's reasons like that I dropped some soups. But to get back to your question about what was the hardest one for me, which is the one, I think it was either the last one or the second to last soup, was the Reuben soup. But I just loved the idea of making a soup version of Reuben, because I think Reuben's a really good sandwich.
I love them.
And I had this thought of buttery rye croutons as the topping. And once I had this idea of buttery rye croutons, I was like, well, I have to make those because they sound so good. I know they're going to be delicious. So I need to figure out that soup because I want to make buttery rye croutons. And the challenge was, well, like, okay, so to SOUPify something, you need just to be like very intimate and know the underlying dish really, really well. So what's a Reuben soup? What's a Reuben sandwich? It's a grilled sandwich, usually with rye bread, with corned beef or pastrami, sauerkraut,
Swiss
cheese,
Island.
and Thousand Island dressing. That's pretty much it. Okay, well, corned beef. Well, that's going to be a product that I'm going to buy. I'm not going to make corned beef. And that's going to be already cooked. So that's going to be something I'm just going to add at the very end. That doesn't need any further cooking. You got to get that tang from the sauerkraut. So I put some of the brine in from the sauerkraut. What am I going to do with a Thousand Island dressing? Like, I'm not going to put dressing in a soup. That's just weird. And it's like putting mayonnaise in a soup, right?
Yeah.
But I kind of broke down the flavors. But so I did end up with that one. Gosh, I should pull it up. But I think it's, I used ketchup. I used Worcestershire sauce. And I essentially used a lot of, the elements that are in, here we go, Reuben soup.
What's it underneath? Oh, beef soups, 69.
Yeah. So we've got caraway seeds for that wryness.
Oh, that looks so good.
Obviously a beef broth. Right. We have ketchup. I have spicy brown deli mustard, sweet relish, prepared horseradish, Worcestershire sauce.
Yeah, that would be the most difficult because now that I'm thinking about it, it would be the Thousand Island, which is one of the main ingredients that makes that sandwich fantastic.
And it's also like a texture thing. It's a creaminess factor. So this is a creamy soup. And then the corned beef and the Swiss cheese and the sauerkraut. In this soup, I did put potatoes in just to give the soup more kind of body, but not necessarily to add potato flavor.
I'm going to make my mom make that.
And then at the very end, the cheese and the sauerkraut and the sour cream. And then you've got those croutons, which are basically rye bread that are chopped in little pieces and fried in a pan with butter.
Yeah. Well, what's crazy is when I first started cooking, was because I lived with my brother and his wife made stewed tomatoes and ground turkey for dinner. And then my brother was like, I'm not making anything. We can go to the bar. And when I started making stuff the first time, and I don't get into this, but like how you think about breaking things down to SOUPified. But I remember being like, I don't have croutons. And I'm like, what are croutons? And I'm like, it's toasted bread.
Right.
So I only like when I make salads now because of that time. And that's why I say it's important to have books like this. Like I just put toast in the toaster and then, or in the oven, and I'll butter it or oil. And then I add seasoning and then I cut it up and it's 10 times better than croutons.
You just brought back such a great memory for me that I totally forgot. In a pinch, my mom sometimes used to toast bread and make quick croutons like that for lentil soup. And they were like the best croutons.
It's such a better way to do it.
Olive oil, salt and pepper and spices. And I totally forgot about that.
I'll do that. And then people will be like, oh my God, what's with these croutons? And I'm like, they're toast on a pinch.
Fresh.
Yeah.
Right.
It's fresh. Yeah.
They're fresh.
Because a regular crouton, like if you just buy the box of croutons, I always loved eating them as a kid. But then I got older. I'm like, this is just like cardboard with seasoning on it. And then when I started making them that way, or even taking like Italian bread, putting it in the oven, chopping it up, or going to a restaurant that does it, it really really changed it. And I didn't know that like the whole reason behind this and the name behind it, which you need to definitely push more because it's super creative. There's so many times that like I'll be talking with my friends and they're like, what do you want to do for the fights? And I'm like, well, we should do cheesesteaks. All right, well, what kind of cheesesteaks? And I'm like, well, we should do like these cheesesteaks where we make them in egg rolls. Like, I'm always the type of person that tries to take food and not make the basic form of it because I've done it a million times in a restaurant. So I love pushing the boundaries of like, hey, let's do, like, for instance, I was talking with my buddy and we've had this idea to do short ribs. And he's like, what I want to do is I want to make short rib raviolis with smoked vodka sauce. And like, just thinking that, I'm like, I think that's going to be good. But like, then he'll be like, do you think we can do that? And I'm like, let's make the dough from scratch. Let's make the short rib. And then I'm like, where do we put the cheese in there? Like, I'm a big person of totally pushing the boundaries and taking something and making it into a different version of what it is. But for the fact that like is way more impressive now that I've realized like that you've taken all these recipes that aren't like your basic recipes. Like you're like, all right, let's do lasagna soup or let's do this soup. It's not something that you just sat down and wrote out. Like there's a massive amount of time that went into figuring out how to do all that. But I think now that I'm getting to know you a little bit more, is that's what drives you is is doing the creative, but then solving the puzzle of how is this going to be broken down.
That's the whole right brain, left brain of me.
Yes.
That
and now that, you know, you said that in the beginning of the podcast, and now I'm starting to understand it where you're the type of person that like, you don't want to give up on the idea. You don't want to give up on, all right, well, how do we do this? Even like, cause even you walking me through the Reuben thing, like I was like, man, that is such a roadblock with that Thousand Island. But then, but that's what I like is like you break it down where you're like, all right, well, what is in a Thousand Island? Now you start having a conversation. You're like, hey, can I do that? And then when you explain, you took the mustard, you did all that. Like, that's awesome. Like, that's not easy to do.
Thank
and
you.
I think for this being your first cookbook and you did it all by yourself and you did this version of it and these styles of soups, there's nothing really that's going to be difficult for you going down the road, growing this brand and doing it because you did the most difficult thing first, which I usually always do as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah. No, I mean, this is, I'm super proud of this book. I love this book. Like it's self-published. It's at some point when well, here's the thing. I didn't really dig into the details of how I'm going to make this into a book until I was done writing the recipes, which it wasn't until the end of August, beginning of September.
But what I think is important to point out is you said that if you would have looked into it, you probably wouldn't have done the book.
Yes. So you and I talked about that before the podcast. So maybe I should just touch on that, which is like, so I already mentioned, I started this out thinking of it as an ebook. And to me, an ebook was just a PDF that I probably would just design on Word or Canva or somehow. I don't know. I guess I would figure that out. It wasn't for me. It's always all about the food. It's all about the food is the name, like, right? It's always about the food and the recipes. And I wanted to get the recipes done. And then I figured like, I mean, I dabbled in a little bit of learning about Amazon and print because I had heard that they have this print on demand. And I'm like, well, that might work for me. Like, that's cool. You know?
Yeah. A couple people told me about that.
So, but again, I didn't really dig into the details until like early September. But it was sometime around August, I think, when I reconnected with my designer, Lasagne, who's working on my website. But we had actually been out of touch for months because I was dragging my feet. And also, well, I was working on a cookbook, but I was dragging my feet on the website prior to that. But I was like we were having our first conversation after a while. And I was like, oh, I'm working on a cookbook. I'm like, you know, she's like, oh, well, who's designing the cookbook? I'm like, well, I don't know. I'm like, I guess I am. Like, I didn't realize that was something. That was something that needed to be done. And she's like, oh, it's always, you know, she's a great graphic designer and she's done a lot of books, but she hadn't done a cookbook. And she, you know, really wanted to work on a cookbook. So I'm like, I would love for you to design my cookbook, you know, like, and she's like, all right, well, let me know when you're done with the recipes. That whole being done with the recipes, it just kept dragging because like I said, I realized that after I was done writing the recipes, I had to style the recipes in a way that was more common, that they were more commonly presented in cookbooks. Things like take out the word deglaze and render.
Yeah.
You know, write out the word teaspoon. Don't just put TSP. You can't put a dash. You have to use the word TO. A lot of little things like that. And then, of course, just making sure they're consistent from one recipe to the next. So that styling, it just went on and on and on. And then writing the recipe head notes, which are like the little introductions that I have of each recipe. That was hard because that's creative writing.
Yeah.
That's a different kind
which
of writing.
is totally different than what you're used to, which is just the breakdown of the recipe.
Which is exactly. I mean, I do a little bit of that. Well, I should say, I mean, I do that with my Instagram account, but it's not for a book, you know?
Yeah.
And in a lot of cookbooks, the recipe head notes are more information about the recipe, like kind of getting into the details. But you know what? I kind of wanted to tell more stories. I mean, so it's really a combination of more information about the recipes and the stories. But
I like that in cookbooks. There's plenty of cookbooks I have where they break down. For a perfect example, the Action Bronson book. He really gets personal in that. He tells you stories about where the idea came from. This is from growing up. And I feel like when you start doing that, now you have somebody who's reading the book to read the book, but also learning. I think Roy Choi has a book like that I have where
I love him.
It's stories and cooking. And I think that's one of my favorite things is when you combine both, where you're reading it as a book, but you're also learning how to cook.
And I've always gotten such great feedback from different followers on Instagram that they love hearing the story. So I thought, well, let me, this book was written in a very conversational tone. It was written the way that I talk. So I think it lends itself to kind of putting those personal stories in. But if you look at, for example, the chicken, like the chicken cordon bleu head note, which was actually one of the first ones that I wrote, has nothing at all to do with the soup. The story has to do with, actually, I'm just going to read it.
Yeah.
I will always remember my first chicken cordon bleu. It was way back in college on the Sunday night after Thanksgiving, when we all returned to the dorms after the long holiday weekend. My roommate Liz brought back a foil tray of it from her mom, who made it just for the girls. Chicken cordon bleu was one of her specialties we had all heard about for months. That first bite of chicken rolled with salty ham and earthy Swiss cheese paired with a buttery sauce was magical. It's a classic pairing that unapologetically lacks significant innovation from one recipe to the next because there's no need for it. Why mess with perfection? This one's for you, Betty.
That's awesome.
Betty's my friend Liz's mom.
Yeah.
So it has nothing at all to do with the soup, but it's the inspiration for that soup recipe. Because it was, when I created that soup recipe, it had to taste like that first chicken cordon bleu that I had from Betty all those years back.
Having your first chicken cordon bleu, I think, is an important moment in life, especially if like
it is important.
It's one of the first things I ever cooked, and I made it for my little brother and my dad, and it's the first time where like I had to ask my parents like, can you buy cooking string and can you buy toothpicks? And I still think it's one of the best things that I ever made, and I'll even talk to my brother now. That was when I was probably 13. He was maybe 9 or however old we were at the time. And he still talks about that chicken cordon bleu.
Yeah. It's funny.
But I was looking through all the different recipes when you first sent it over. And I saw there was ones that stood out in the chicken cordon bleu soup. I was like, oh, chicken cordon bleu.
Yeah.
It's one of my, I think people are just used to getting it at weddings, but like making that or having it in a soup, I can't wait to do it.
Funny thing, I just always thought that was, even when I wrote the book, I thought that was a French recipe or French inspired. It is something you learn. I think we learned it in cooking school. So it's sort of under that like classic cooking techniques, chicken cordon bleu, chicken Kiev, those things that you make once and you don't really.
I've never made chicken cordon bleu since. Yeah. And it was the best thing I ever made. And now I'm like, I think I'm making chicken cordon bleu for the fights.
And so someone asked me like, where's that? Oh, it was a friend of mine, actually, my friend Wendy, who lives in Italy, who's traveled a lot. She's like, what's chicken cordon bleu? I'm like, you don't know what that is? She's like, no. I'm like, well, it's a French dish, I think. And then I Googled it. It's actually not. It's a Swiss dish.
Yeah.
And I lived in Switzerland for 2 years in my mid-20s. And I never heard of or saw chicken cordon bleu on the menu. So I don't know. I mean, maybe it was developed in Switzerland. Who the heck knows? It could be one of those things that was developed in this hotel in this one town. And or they just push it and they're like, it's Switzerland. But who knows? Like, maybe it'll come back into fashion because of SOUPified. But I think that's the next soup that you should make.
I'm gonna. That's the thing is, I said to my friend Gino, because we always just try and learn stuff, because we always talk about opening a cafe. And I'm like, all right, well, what would we do? We would do soups. And I brought the book over and I'm like, now we have something to learn soups off of. Right. But I like being driven and I like being pushed creatively. And I like having... there's a ton of things that I want to do with my life. And one of them is learn more on cooking. And I don't have the time to go to a class. I don't have the time to go to night school. I don't have, I make my little things here and there, but they're usually simple and easy. And there's things that I miss out of it, like making soup. And I said to her, I'm like, she's coming on the podcast. I'm like, this is a total excuse just to start making soups. And like, we're excited now. And when I brought the book over, she was like, oh, this is cool. This is nice. This is easy. The kids can do it. And we're going to start doing soups off of it. And I'll definitely start tagging you in them.
That's great. And the thing about making soup is most soup cookbooks, classic soup cookbooks that are out there, focus a lot on making the stock from scratch. And don't get me wrong, I love homemade stock. And it's the very first thing you learn in cooking school is how to make homemade stock. And it does make a difference. And I mention it, and there's a recipe for it in the back of the book. But the reality is that most people are not making stock from scratch.
No.
That's a whole process. That's just a little bit hardcore, really. And it takes time and storage space and all that kind of stuff. So I didn't really focus on that aspect of this that much. It was like, just use the lowest sodium broth that you can find, and the reality is I use purchased broth probably 90% of the time myself as well. There's definitely a lot to choose from these days. You can get no sodium, you can get low sodium.
But I like that you're honest with not making it from scratch and all that, because I feel like the average person isn't going to have time to do that. Right. And if somebody's buying this to learn how to make soups, you don't want to overcomplicate it to where they're in one recipe and they're like, I'm not doing this anymore. Because the lasagna one to me was, I was like, I don't know if this is going to be a little overwhelming. Do we have time? And then when that laid out and went so well that I was just like, I'm like, well, if that one that I thought was going to be the biggest challenge went super easy, the rest of these are just going to fall into place. And if it's overcomplicated, you start getting people turned off by it.
Right. And there, there is, with some of the soups, there is a fair amount of chopping because you're making soup from scratch. And,
I don't mind prep. It's part of it.
Well, you might not mind prep, but I think not everyone feels that way. And then if you add it on, well, the assumption that you have to make your own stock from scratch, then no one's going to want the book. Yeah.
And you could also go, like, because Wegmans around here, which is similar to a Whole Foods, you can go and get your pre-cut onions, your pre-cut carrots.
You absolutely can.
You can get all that stuff. If you're the type of person that doesn't want to do prep, you can easily go get all the ingredients.
You can always get carrots, celery, and onions for sure. And those are almost, almost every soup has onions and celery.
Yeah. What's your plans in the future for moving forward with the book? I know you're real heavy on pushing this. I know you said you got a couple podcasts coming down the pipe. Like, where do you want the book to go?
That's a really good question. Well, I want to see it in more people's homes. I want to see more and more people talking about SOUPified soups. I'd love for it to become the go-to book, every winter season. That it's not just like, okay, it's popular now because it's new, but I'm hoping that it has a life and it becomes used throughout the year as well, because there are things that I have cold soups in here. I have 4 cold soups. So I think that there are, to me, I eat soup all year round. I think a lot of people do. I think that it can be pulled out, like make the Reuben soup on St. Patty's Day. Or
that's what I'm doing.
Make the Philly cheesesteak soup on Super Bowl Sunday. You know, you have caprese soup and prosciutto and melon soup. Actually, the prosciutto and melon soup could also make a really great cocktail. I have to be honest. I'd like to see it continue to grow. I'd like to see more and more people become interested in the book, and I definitely want to do more books. Even just last night, the last thing I did before I fell asleep, again on my notes on my phone, I reworked the name for my next cookbook. I have a concept in my head of what I want, but I'm constantly kind of refining it. And when I just pulled in today to the parking spot right before I came in, I had an idea for another SOUPified soup, because I have a whole list of SOUPified soups that.
Yeah, because you could do volumes of this
beyond this 31 recipes. I don't know if I'm going to be doing more SOUPified cookbooks, but if there's a demand for it, I absolutely will. But I wrote down spanakopita soup. I'm like, that would make a great soup.
What's all in that?
That's that Greek dish where it's phyllo pastry and it's spinach and feta cheese and it's baked.
Yes.
So I could totally see the phyllo would be the topping. You bake that, maybe put some sea salt and whatnot, and that's your crispy topping. And then the soup itself would be a little bit similar to the spinach quiche soup, in that it would basically be a spinach soup. Maybe it would be pureed, maybe not, and then you'd add feta in at the end, and you'd have dill and all the other flavors that go into onions.
I love the rabbit hole that you've created to take dishes and turn them into soups. I think the creative aspect behind it. I knew you were a creative person. I didn't know how obsessed with creativity or how you were doing it through food. And after you explaining what SOUPified is, hats off to you for finding that rabbit hole.
Thank you.
There's nothing better. And I do it a lot, and I kind of rotate through different things, but like I was saying to you before, like if you're into doing something and you're not afraid to push yourself and you're obsessed with something to the point where you're thinking about it before when you go to sleep, and then before you come in here, you're writing it. Like, it's important to pay attention to the fact that you do that. And there's a lot of people who get discouraged, or they're shy, or they don't want to put themselves out there. And if you push yourself, it's at a media time where you can literally write a cookbook, get a following. Like, it's not, if you put the work in, you have access to be doing self-promotion and not needing to do all this stuff. And just the release that you get, or like I'm sure it is with you too, when you figured out sitting outside how to turn that into a soup, the feeling, whether it's for 30 seconds where you're like, ah, it's so much fun.
I know. I'm thinking of my Greek friend Angela. I'm like, I got to tell her about this idea from, SOUPified soup.
And then when you have friends that are crazy like that too, and you get on the phone with them, you're like, I think I'm turning this. Like, that's how the guys are with the food fights. Like, I'll tell them something, and then my one friend, he's just starting to get into cooking, which I'm glad, because I'll explain stuff to him and I'll be like, what do you think? And he's like, you're crazy, but do it. And then like we eat it, and like, that's what makes food so special, especially where you're not just like, hey, here's tomato soup and grilled cheese. You're like, here's all these things that are like if you make these, you're going to feel how much love that you put into writing it and all of that. And I think that's what's important about this book, now breaking it down with you, is that it's not just recipes. These are like times that you had with yourself to create this, and you put a lot into it. And it's one of the main reasons I wanted to have you on. I'm excited to actually, I don't smile much, but with food I do. But like, to find out that this has made you so happy, regardless of the amount of work. And we went into what the work was behind this, and it wasn't easy. And I think that, I don't know, this is cool. I definitely want to work more together. I hope you keep pushing this. I don't think you realize how far you've come in the amount of time you have, and the following that you built, and you have people buying your stuff. And I think if you just keep going, the sky's the limit for what you want to do. And I think it's cool. And you talked about like the shows and different things that you're going to do, and just keep lining it up, and it'll eventually, I mean, it's already like has broke enough to where like you're doing this, but I could see you doing this, and this is all you do, and you're just doing your thing. And it's a weird time to do it, but if you're doing this now and putting out cookbooks, and that's also like, a lot of people stop themselves because of what's going on with COVID and everything, and you're still doing it, and that's also huge. I want to thank you for driving up here. You did not have to do that. I appreciate you doing that. You brought me 2 soups, and I can't wait to give them to people and try them out for this weekend. And I want to give you an opportunity to plug the book, plug your social media, let everyone know any which way possible that they can to figure out anything that has to do with you.
Thank you. Well, I loved making the drive. Also, it was easy. It was a straight shoot.
Yeah,
from
it's
Manhattan,
a straight shot. I try and explain to everybody. I'm like, you just get on one road and go all the way.
Yeah, no, it was great. And thanks for inviting me. This is
of course.
Great. So yes, so the book is SOUPified, soups inspired by your favorite dishes. It is available. The paperback and the Kindle is available on Amazon. And if you Google SOUPified, the hardcover is actually available at tons of online retailers, Barnes & Noble, and lots of other retailers out there. So definitely check it out. If you are interested in checking out a few SOUPified recipes before you get the book, sign up for my mailing list for my upcoming website. It's www.manjawithmichele.com. That's Michelle with 1 L. And I guess you'll put that in the
I'll
show
have
notes
all
whatnot.
the links and everything in there.
And when you sign up for my mailing list, you get access to 3 SOUPified recipes that are not in the book and that will not be on my website. So the only way to get those recipes is to sign up for my mailing list.
Awesome. Thank you again for coming on. The book is SOUPified. You can find it wherever she just said. There'll be links here. There's going to be links below. Follow her on social media. I started doing that when we started talking. She's posting a ton of content. There's food, there's recipes, there's live. Instagram is what?
Manja with Michele.
With Michele. And I'll have that in the lower third. If you're just coming on the Never Again Studio, you can go to neveragainstudio.com. It has all of my prior Never Again podcast. It has Now We Go. There's different things on there. There's apparel on there. If you go to neveragainstudio.com, you can find out everything Never Again. Thank you again. I'm excited for when I have the cooking thing set up that we can work on stuff like that too.
Sounds great. Thank you, Michael.
Yes, thank you. I'm kind of ending this correctly, but I never know how, and then it's just awkward and weird. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Sometimes I say goodbye. It's awkward.
I believe it.